Hello, welcome. We're here to talk about ear training today, and I'm in the circle. I had to do it. I was looking at the thing today and I thought, that's where my face goes. Anyway, today we're going to do a deep dive into the major scale. And though this is being streamed right now, I'm going to try to keep it concise and try to get through some things. This is going to be a follow-up to a previous video that I did, which if you haven't seen, you should see before this. Now, if you're live here on the stream, then of course, watch this. But if you're in the future watching the recording, you should watch the other video, which is called The Secret of Ear Training, because it talks about some things that are sort of pertinent to what we're going to talk about today, with some other examples that aren't going to be covered today. Today, we're going to continue on from that topic and look at how to hear, how to feel the notes of a major scale so that you can transcribe music either that you hear out in the world or that you hear internally when you're composing or improvising. Basically so that whenever melodies are played, you know what they are without having to work them out, so to speak. The working out is done by an immediate recognition of the feeling of each note as opposed to testing out pitches on your instrument and then naming those letters. So welcome to everybody who's here live, and welcome everybody in the future. If you're here live or in the future, please say hello. Happy to take questions as we go, so long as your questions are sort of on the topic that we're currently talking about. And then at the end, I'll be happy to take questions related to ear training in general. So this video is not going to talk about chords. It's also not going to talk about some of these other degrees that you saw me playing there, the flattened degrees and sharp 4 and all that. That's maybe for another video. This is just about the major scale. But of course, all the principles that I'm going to talk about here apply to all the other degrees as well. It's just doing 12 in one video is a lot, I think. So we'll stick with 7. So just to recap a little bit on the previous thing, the idea here is that the secret of ear training is in the feeling that the notes themselves produce, or I should say the relationships produce, and that all relationships and structures within music produce a particular kind of feeling state, and through being exposed to this feeling state over and over again and giving a name to it, eventually you learn to recognize it by feeling, or by sound, if that makes more sense to you than saying by feeling. Just like you do recognizing all sorts of things in life. You know, you see something, you hear something, you feel something, you think something, you smell something, taste something, many, many times, and put a name to it, and eventually it becomes obvious. Oh, that's that thing, that's that thing, that's that thing. And notes and their relationships, like chords, scales, modes, key changes, I mean, anything you can think of can all be recognized in this way through exposure and repetition. So, I hear voice in double. Interesting. Does anyone else have my voice doubled? Hopefully not. Maybe you got 2 tabs open. All right. Here we go. So we're going to continue on now. This is using a new visualizer here that a friend of mine put together for me based on some specifications that I gave to him. And this is, as you might have recognized already, a circle of fifths layout. If you're not aware of the circle of fifths, I'm not going to go into it today, but this is arranged such that the numbers here are reflecting, they're all a fifth apart so long as you're starting at the top, starting anywhere, and going clockwise. So 1 to 5, 5 to 2, 2 to 6, 6 to 3, and so on like that. That's a chain of fifths going around, or a chain of fourths if you go counterclockwise. And there's a number of reasons that I've arranged them like this, but first I want to give a shout out to Stephen Malinowski and his amazing channel of music visualizations. S. Malin is the name of the channel. I'll put a link. It's not in the description right now, but afterwards I will put a link in the description to his channel. And he does amazing visualizations of music, mainly classical music, but also other types as well. And one of the types of visualizations that he does is called harmonic coloring, where the degrees of melody notes, or all notes, I should say, within a piece are given a specific color, just like they are here, so that every time the 1 appears, it's blue. Every time the 5 appears, it's purple. Every time the sharp 4 appears, it's yellow. And through exposure, you can learn to sort of recognize this and make a relationship so that when you watch those animations and you hear certain things and you see certain colors, something happens sort of subconsciously, and you gain some understanding about what's going on in the music. Here I've decided to represent them in a circle of fifths because many reasons we'll talk about as we go into, but primarily because my face fits in the middle. No, that was an afterthought, but it worked out pretty well. Prerequisite knowledge for what we're going to talk about today would be an understanding generally of what it means to be in a key or tonality, so that all that really means is that there's one note that is the home note, that is the generating tone of all the others. In this case, it's this. And that note feels most settled, most rested, most resolved. And all the other tones have a relationship to that. In fact, the other tones gain their meaning due to their relationship to the tonic. So that's some prerequisite knowledge. The other is about scale degrees. And scale degrees, it's just a way of numbering the notes of a scale. So we have a major scale, which at the moment is E. And instead of thinking E, F sharp, G sharp, A, B, C sharp, D sharp, E, we're thinking 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1. We're just numbering them. And the reason for that is that numbering them allows you to abstract the knowledge, the experiences, from a particular key to all keys, because then you can simply think of all major scales as being 1 through 7, as opposed to specific notes, C, D, E, F, G, or E, F sharp, G sharp, A, B, or whatever. So whatever applies to the numbers applies to all scales, because the numbers are an abstracted form of a scale in general. So what we're going to do today then is listen to each of these degrees of the major scale in turn and experientially gain some familiarity with what they feel like, with what they sound like, so that you might start to recognize them in music when you hear them. And we'll do a whole bunch of examples of that as we go. So unless there's any other questions right now or stuff you think I need to mention before I begin, we can dive into it. And like I said, feel free to ask questions anytime, so long as it's roughly on the topic that we're talking about at the moment. If not, keep them to the end and we can answer them then. If you're watching this in the future, there will be timestamps made for this, so you can skip around if you need to or repeat certain sections or whatever. Anyway, welcome to everybody who's in the chat. Nice to see you all, and let's get into it. So, first of all, we're going to play a drone. Now, why are we playing a drone? The drone is going to be playing the tonic, that is the home note, the generating tone, the resolving tone of the key we're in. Since we're in E right now, it's going to be an E. And that's going to be sounding continuously, so that when we play the other notes on top, they gain a relationship to the tonic. The tonic is going to color the way those other notes sound. If this is an unfamiliar concept to you, it's something worth understanding, because a particular note in and of itself feels some way only in relation to other notes, and in this case to a tonic, such that if I play an E underneath this E, I can't play polyphonic stuff right now. So we'll give it another, here, how about this? I'll put polyphonic on for the moment because this is going to be crucial. If I play an E and I play an E under it, E feels like this. But if I put a flat under it, sorry, G sharp in this case. If we put an A under it, put an F under it, you see, this pitch is gaining different meanings, different contextual flavors based on its relationship to the bass note underneath it. So we're going to be continuously sounding a bass note, you could say, a drone, which we're going to play everything over so that we can most clearly hear and feel whatever the sort of flavor or color of that note is. So let's turn the drone on and let me know how the audio sounds in case, like, my voice is too quiet or whatever it is compared to the thing overall. So here we go, is the drone. First of all, we're just going to listen to the 1, to the tonic. Now, this is something that I covered in my previous video, but it wasn't just over drones like this. We were doing it in other contexts. So we're already hearing the tonic. And when you hear the tonic melodically, it sounds perfect. It sounds entirely smooth. It sounds utterly settled, almost as if there's nothing there. And that goes for any octave you play it in. As you can see on my visualizer, nothing changes when I change octave because no matter what the octave is, the note is still the tonic. Little quiet. What's a little quiet? The music or my voice? Okay, so let's just listen to this sound for a second. This is the process of gaining familiarity. Even better to sing, and we'll talk about that as we go. Because when you sing, you feel the resonance in your body. And singing has another benefit, which is that you are producing the tone. You're not simply recognizing it. You're able to generate the feeling within you and then produce it. The drone is a little quiet. The drone is quite loud if you have the speaker with the low end. So what is the answer? Is it quiet or is it not? I'm going to turn down some bass. How about that? All right, so right, the drone is bassy. Quiet on a phone speaker. Okay, well, if someone has a good solution for me, let me know. Hopefully it can work out. So this is the tonic feeling. Now, we're gonna leave that behind quickly because I already covered it in the previous video, and the feeling is the strongest, is the easiest to recognize because it is the drone, it is the tonic, it is the most settled. If there's one tone, one scale degree that everyone can probably already recognize, it's this one, because melodies and chords and progressions and songs generally finish on it. That feeling of settledness, that is the tonic feeling. That's the one feeling. That goes for all scales, all scales, I should say, for tonal relationships, so minor scales and Dorian mode, Mixolydian, and all that. The one always feels like this. Doesn't matter what the other notes are, it has this quality of settledness. Now, we're gonna move in a certain order here. The certain order of listening to these next tones is by increasing the complexity of the ratio. And I'm just going to quickly mention this. I don't want to go into ratios very much, but just briefly. Ratios are formed in music. These sort of pitch ratios are formed by the amount of vibrations that one pitch has in the time of vibrations that another pitch has. So you can think of an octave, which is a doubling, an exact doubling of the frequency, as having 2 vibrations for every 1 vibration of the lower one, such that it's a 2-to-1 ratio, as we call it. And as these ratios get more complex, the feeling of the scale degrees of the notes gets more dissonant, as we would say, or it gets more complex. You might call it more complex. So we're going to go in order of increasing complexity of the ratios. Not that it matters that you know what the ratios are. I just wanted to explain that. So when I say increasing complexity, you say, why is a note more complex than another one? That's why. All right, so let's get back into it. So next up, beyond the tonic, the next most complex would be the fifth. Now compare the way that the tonic sounds to the way the fifth sounds. Back to the tonic. Yeah, I should say the least complex. So notice that the fifth kind of sounds like the tonic in a way. It doesn't sound like this or this. Notice how different this sound is from this, how different it feels, how smooth this feels, and how whatever this feels. Notice that these two notes are opposing each other on the circle. That's because they're maximally different from each other, harmonically speaking. Whereas the fifth is the closest, harmonically speaking, to the tonic. And oftentimes this is a mistake that people make when they're trying to work out melodies or whatever, is to mistake the fifth for the one, the five for the one, because they are so similar in a certain way. So as we add more notes, this is going to become more apparent. Okay, now we're going to add the third. Sorry, no, we're not. We're going to add the fourth. Get my math right. So here's 1, 5. Now compare with 4. 5, 4. It's like an eye test. 5 or 4? 5 or 4? I gotta hear it again. 5 or 4? Notice the total smoothness of the tonic compared when I go between these two. And then when we move to the tonic, tonic has that feeling of perfection, basically. Now, 5, compare 5 to 4. They don't feel the same. Like, you can tell them apart. And if possible, when doing this sort of thing, you can try to, in a certain way, ignore the actual pitch that you're hearing, the specific pitch itself, and we want simply the feeling of whatever this is. And it's not deep or complex or anything that you can't figure out, it's just this feels like this. I can't put words to it, but it feels like this, and this feels like this. And it's the feeling that we learn to recognize, not the specific pitch, because in a different key, the pitches will all be different, but the feeling will be the same. And we're gonna look at that later. Isn't the 5 the most unstable? No. No, it's not. People talk about the 5 chord as being maximum tension, let's say, in a cadence away from home, and there's definitely some truth to that, but that's a different sort of thing. So, we have 1, 5, 4. Now imagine a melody played with these things. Now I'm going to play that melody in slow motion, and simply notice the way that as the notes change, your inner feeling shifts in some subtle way. Each note feels slightly different from one another, and those different feelings are the point of this whole thing, okay? Five always feels like this. 4 always feels like this. Okay, now we're going to add the next one. It's going to be 3. One, 5, 3, 4. Now on the keyboard, 4 and 3 are right next to each other, half step away. But notice how different the feeling is as we go between 4 So, being melodically close to each other is often, if not always, harmonically distant. That is, they sound close together, but they feel very different. As another example, compare 1 with a half step away, flat 2. How different those two notes feel. even though they're right next to each other. Big harmonic changes are made with tiny melodic movements, and often tiny harmonic movements are felt with large melodic leaps, 1 to 5. It's pretty far, but they feel very similar in a certain sense. 3. So say you heard a melody that went. Played that differently both times. Now you hear it in slow motion. Here's this feeling to this. There's the 5 feeling. 4, 3, 2. Okay, so you see, hearing a melody is like, it's like a flow of feelings. It's like a feeling movie. They flow one into another. There's this, and then this, and then this, and then this, and then this. Just like it is with chord progressions. You know, when you hear chord progressions, it's like each chord is its own whole world. Melodies too are just like that. They also have their own little world. Each one feels very specific. And if it doesn't feel very specific to you right now, it's just due to lack of familiarity. With repetition, this becomes like, you can't miss it. You know, it's just like when you meet a person for the first time and then you see them in a crowd, or they're in a crowd, you may not even recognize them, you only seen them once. But your best friend, you turn around and they're like 100 feet away in the middle of the crowd, bang, you recognize. Why? Because you've seen them. You've seen them and you love them and you know them and care about them. So this familiarity, you get it. This is similar. If it feels like, you know, opaque, it just means lack of familiarity. It's no more complex than recognizing anything else in life. The feeling is immediate. It is this. Don't think about it. There's nothing to think about. There's nothing to explain. There's nothing to conceptually grasp about it. There's this feeling, and there's this one, and there's this one, and this one. Trying to explain them in other terms, like I might say a fifth sounds open, shiny, third sounds kind of warm and juicy or something. This sounds kind of open but angular or rough. I don't know, these are just the words that come to me. The point is that the words are not the thing. Only the thing is the thing. Only the feeling is itself. And that's the point. You don't need another label for it. It's this. It's this feeling you're having right now that we call 5. So that's the only other label we want, so that we can convert the sound into notes that we can play. My drone says, you've been talking too long. Okay, so this is the general vibe, okay? This process of hearing each thing, each feeling one at a time, to start to get a sense. I mean, we're going at literally at light speed right now, as slow as this might seem. Really, this should be done over a course of days, if not weeks, if not months, of gaining familiarity. Let's continue on, though, for now. Okay, so next up in our order of complexity, we went 1, 5, 4, 3, and now we're going to go 6. So here's 6. Yeah, we're going to get a new drone once we get all the notes. Here's 6. Have you ever felt that in music, this sound? Well, if you've ever felt that feeling, that's the feeling of what we call 6. Moving to 5. Notice the way that 6 feels different from 5. Which is different from 4. As well, notice that 4 is the only one that currently on the left side of the circle. Here's 5, 3, 6. Notice that 4 has sort of the most different sound of them so far. Different feeling. There's a hint there about this arrangement of the circle of fifths and the relationship between these different feelings. Consider also that, as I said, 1 and 5 feel very similar to each other in a certain sense. Certainly more similar than 1 and 6 do. And notice that they are right next to each other on the circle. That's also important. Like 6 and 3 are right next to each other. And there's a similarity in their sound. The similarity perhaps is not immediately apparent if this is new to you, but over time, you'll see these notes that are close to each other harmonically, that is fifths away from each other basically, have similar qualities. And there's another layer to this that I'm not showing right now, that perhaps in another video we'll talk about if people are interested, about how these tones are actually being generated and how our ear is making sense of them, such that it gives you understanding of why certain tones sound and feel like other ones sound and feel like. I'm just giving a pretty general idea here about this. When they're close on the circle, perhaps they feel the same in a certain way, but there's another layer too. Is recognizing scale degrees more useful in intervals? I'd say so. I'd definitely say so. I wouldn't say that recognizing intervals is not useful, for sure. And when it comes to actually recognizing melodies by ear, everything gets used. It's not like you just do this, because nobody cares what method you're using to figure it out, so you use everything. All of your musical experience and knowledge comes to bear on a transcription problem or converting, what you're audiating in your imagination into your instrument. So there's a mix of intervals with scale degrees, with, melodic gestures. I know that's just 3 notes up a scale. I don't even have to feel each of them independently. I can tell that's 3. Things like this. It all combines in actual practice, but we're just isolating this kind of sort of key quality right now that perhaps you haven't considered before. Yeah, overtones. Exactly. When we say something is harmonically related, that means the overtones in those 2 notes are very similar to each other, and notes that are not harmonically close have very distant or very different sets of overtones in them. And that is perceived to us as this. As opposed to this. Notice how melodically close these notes are. I'm playing B and A sharp, but they feel like other worlds. Can it get more in your face than this sound? Sharp 4 sound is like sticks out in a crowd, Anyway, so again, as I play through these, try to, in a certain sense, ignore the specific pitches and just be aware of the shifting feelings that go on inside. And these feelings are not feelings like you might talk about in normal language, anger and happiness and hope, and not like that. These feelings are subtle in a way, and they're indescribable, really. They're just whatever that is. You don't have to know what it is, because it's nothing other than itself, so you do know what it is. You don't have to be able to say it. You just have to recognize it. Define overtones. Overtones are the notes that are within a single note. That is, when you play it, even as you hear the drone right now, if you listen very closely, you're not hearing a single note, even though I'm playing a single note. There's all sorts of pitches that are like fluctuating in and out, right? That come forward and move back. This is the overtones or harmonics that are generated by a single note. That is, when you vibrate a string, for instance, this is a cello playing right now, or bass or something. When you vibrate that, it doesn't just produce one note, it produces a whole series, and that series appears in a very specific order, and it always appears in that order. And that's called the overtone series, or series of harmonics, or harmonic series. It's an amazing field to study. And yeah, when the overtones or harmonics of two notes are quite similar, those two notes sound similar, feel similar, like 1 and 5. And when they're quite distinct, like 1 and sharp 4, they feel very distinct, 1 and flat 2. All right. Aren't overtones simply the upper harmonics? Yeah, they're essentially synonyms, not quite, but basically. All right, so moving on. Now our next note is going to be 2. Compare this to 3. 2. Notice that 2 is a fifth away from 5. So if I play 1, then I play 5. Take note of this feeling. Now, go to 2. Notice that it has the 5 feeling, but even more, in a way. 5 compared to 1. 2. It's like almost the next fractal layer of the 5-ness. That's because, speaking about ratios briefly again, even though we call this 5, that's not really a good name for it. This note is actually a tripling. When you take this frequency and you triple it, you actually get this frequency up an octave, but we're going to octave reduce it for now. When you triple this frequency, you get this. And when you triple this frequency, you get this. There's a little hint about these other layers I'm talking about, of how this stuff works and why things feel the way they do and so on. The point, all we got to know for now, is that 2 is its own thing, of course, but it's kind of like 5, but more, in a way. Kind of like 5 is like 1, but more, in a certain sense. All right, so now we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I'm gonna walk up the scale and walk back down, and I just want you to, again, ignore the pitches, but you might even want to close your eyes. Just be attentive to the feeling state of each note. I'm going to walk up and down the scale 1 through 6 right now. Oh, my drone says no. Here we go. Do it in the next octave. Take note of how each one has its own identity. 2 does not feel like 1. 3 does not feel like 2. With these notes, we could play Twinkle Twinkle Little Star. Now, take the perspective of listening to Twinkle Twinkle Little Star from this feeling perspective as opposed to from the sort of pitch and interval perspective, okay? Feeling of 1, 5, 6, back to 5. That same feeling comes again. 4, 3, 2, 1. This is sort of how, with experience, melodies start to sound. Melodies start to become clear as to what it is that you're hearing. You're putting a name to the feelings that you've heard your whole feelings you've felt and sounds you've heard your whole life. It's not like you haven't. These are new. These are very familiar. This is what music's made of. All melodies do this, have these feelings. But because you might not have paid attention to them, and especially because you might not have named them so that you have a sort of a frame of reference which you can refer to again and again, or number them in this case, you might not have taken note of that. But Twinkle Twinkle Little Star, even if you sing it away from the drone, well, we'll play it for now. There's the 5th, and you can see the numbers. I don't gotta say it. Notice that even when the drone's not playing, these degrees still feel the same way, because internally you have a kind of virtual tonic sounding in a certain sense. You're not actually hearing it, but it's what's giving context to all of these tones you're hearing. If we radically change the key, which we'll do at some point, and play the same notes and same exact pitches, they're not going to feel like Twinkle Twinkle Little Star anymore. It's going to feel like something completely different. We'll get to that. All right. So lastly, we have 7. So drone once more, and then we're going to switch up the drone. Would you say Twinkle Twinkle follows call and response pattern? I don't know. Kind of. Here we go. This is going to be 7. So 7 is the most complex degree, most complex ratio in the major scale, and you can hear it. It's right next to 1 half step. But look how far on the circle it moves. And how different it feels. Say a song starts, and it starts with a drone, or a bass guitar or something is like doing this. And the first note that you hear is the 1. It sounds like this. Now imagine the song starts and the first note that you hear is the 7. Completely different, right? You can't mistake them. This is this is this, right? Compare it to 5. Compare 7 to 3. Okay, so that's a bit of an introduction, and I'm skipping over many things we could talk about. I just want to give a flavor, though, for now, because no matter how long I talk about this today and how many examples we listen to, you're not going to just get it in one go. This is not something that, this recognition doesn't come in a day. It doesn't come in 2 days, doesn't come in a week, doesn't come in a month. If you're on it and you're really working on it, yeah, you're definitely going to start to gain some facility with it and instinctive ability with it in a month, definitely. But it's going to take months, if not years, probably to gain fluency, let's say, with it, so that it's just bang. Now, you may gain fluency with certain degrees very quickly and other degrees very slowly. That might be due to your physical makeup or your mental makeup or who knows what, or just due to lack of familiarity. You hear fifths a lot and thirds a lot, but you don't hear sevens and fours a lot, for instance, in the music you listen to, or you don't recognize them, you don't notice them, or whatever it is. So it's important to have realistic expectations. Though I would say this is the secret of ear training, this is the way that this actually works, so to speak, that doesn't mean that you just learn it and you know it. It's not an intellectual piece of information like learning how to use tritone subs or whatever, or some kind of other theoretical construct where you read about it, you play it a few times, got it, and then you can kind of just go do it roughly. It isn't like that. This is a behind the scenes subconscious instinctive thing that you can't force yourself to get. And you're not good because you get it quickly, and you're not bad because you don't. It's not up to you. It's not something you have any control over. Even if you expose yourself to these sounds and sing and name them every day, you might get it very quickly, or you might get it very slowly. There's nothing you can do about it, but it's worth getting. So whatever it is, just do that. And if it takes you a long time, it takes you a long time. But the point is, you want to get it, I would say. And if it's quick, it's quick. Cool. So, all right. We are going to talk about how to practice this. So let's talk about that just briefly now before we move to a different key. Practicing this consists of exposure, repeated exposure, conscious exposure, where you're hearing the degree and you are knowing what you're hearing. That is, you're labeling it. So right now we're playing it in a drone context because it's the purest, you could say. It's the way to, most clearly hear what a given degree sounds like or feels like. So you play it against the drone. This is you now, on your own time. You put a drone on and you play it on any instrument. Or singing it is even better. And you are conscious that this is 7. This is 1. This is 7. That's basically it. I mean, it's doing this again and again, doing this one, then moving to this one, doing this in different keys on different days and so on, until it starts to be like too obvious. And I would really suggest the singing thing. And you can start singing with it by singing the pitches that you play. Then letting go. And as you're singing, you're feeling it physically in your body, the resonance. You're knowing it intellectually, 7. You're hearing it. And there's a big difference between being able to recognize and being able to produce. It's like, maybe you're an artist and you can recognize a particular kind of flower when you see it, but you can't draw it from memory, for instance. That's the same sort of thing here. Early on, in whatever time it takes, you end up being able to recognize these sounds. I'm going to turn these numbers off at some point, and we're going to see how we do. And so that when you hear a 2, you recognize a 2, but given a drone with no context, can you produce a 2 out of nowhere? That's, what would you say? Not advanced, but it's a further level of some sort within this. And that means you really know it because you can produce it on the fly. You are able to generate these feelings and produce the pitches that produce them, as opposed to just hearing them and being able to say that's what that is and that's what that is. And even that, being able to recognize, is already, wow, opens up a world, not just for these sort of technical ideas I'm talking about, like transcribing melodies and all this, but your musicality actually shifts and increases through this sort of work because you're gaining familiarity with the language of music on its own terms, in a sense. The music is a flow of feelings, and those feelings are very specific. They are exactly what they are. They're not some vague haze. Maybe it seems like that when you don't spend the time, but everything feels exactly what it is. And by recognizing those and then eventually learning to produce those, your instinctive musicality, your ability to write melodies, to improvise, to feel, to imagine, to audiate, as we say, which is musical imagination, that increases with this sort of stuff. I mean, this is honestly some of the most fundamental types of music exercises that you can do. So as an example of how I practice this these days, my wife will tell you, I often go for walks with my dog, and when I'm out, I'm just listening to drones. And I just put on, I have a playlist of some drones that I like on Spotify, and I just randomize it. They play for 10 minutes, I think, each. And I just sing against the drones while they're ringing in my ear. And I don't have any instrument there, of course. So I'm doing all sorts of things of walking up and down various modes, doing various patterns like up a fifth, down a third, up a fifth, down a third, singing melodies, trying to do up a Lydian scale, down a Phrygian scale, singing chord arpeggios over the drone, various things like this. It's a means of having a little playground to have fun in. And even when you're just beginning, you can already do this. You can just put a drone on and start throwing your voice around, finding the grooves, not grooves as in musical grooves, but grooves as in like a slot in a thing. The grooves where the notes go shing. Oh, there's a thing. Now you might not know what that thing is, but you can find things. You can find little grooves, little slots where the notes fit. And those slots are where you get these ratios that I'm talking about, these ratios of 4:3 or 5:4 or whatever it is, 9:8, all these different ratios. They feel a particular way, and when you find them, they go, oh, there it is. So maybe you start by sitting at your instrument and you put on a drone and you play around with these things. But then you do want to go out or just leave the instrument alone and do it where you are and sing them yourself. And practice singing little melodies and figure out, oh, what is Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star? Oh, it's 1, 1, 5, 5, 6, 6, 5, 4, 4, 3, 3, 2, 2, 1. Change the drone. Can you still reproduce that melody? Well, if you know the feelings of 1, 5, 6, 4, 3, 2, then you can. You can produce it in any key because, of course, you're able to pull those feelings up and produce the notes. The playlist is not my playlist, actually. It's a channel called, I'm pretty sure, My Noise. Maybe someone wants to check this for me. It's called like My Noise, and the album is called Indian Drones. And it's like recordings of tambura playing like they do in Indian raga. Anyway, I really like that because with the tambura, you really hear all these different harmonics fluctuating in and out. And it's a very cool experience. Anyway, I want to move on for now. We can talk more about exercises afterwards. So here we go. We're going to get a new drone. And let's go with... here. And I need to actually refresh this. All right. How do you know what pitch you're singing at? This is something I struggle with a lot. Well, it depends on if you're asking, are you wanting the letter name? Am I singing a B in the previous key? Or are you wanting the number? Here we're talking just about numbers. It doesn't really matter at this point what actual pitch name you're singing, if it's a B or if it's a D flat or if it's whatever. You just want to know, is it 5? And the way you know is by learning what 5 sounds like through these sorts of explorations and practicing, and then attempting to sing it. And then later, when you're away and sort of cold-eared, that is, you've not been doing it for a while, you put on a drone and you attempt to sing 5. You try to generate the feeling within yourself of what 5 feels like, and then produce the pitch that matches that feeling, or produces the feeling. And over time, it becomes very obvious if you're doing it or not. Like, there's no mistaking it. All right, here we go. Now I'm going to play in a different key. And we're just going to explore the same set of tones, and I just want you to notice that they feel the same. Even though the pitches are all different now. Now this is 1. But 1 still feels like that, still feels settled, still feels resolved, still feels whatever you want to call that. Here's 5. Oh, this thing's not registering my thing. 4. There's the 7 feeling. It's a very different pitch from where it was before. So you see, these feelings, these sounds are due to the ratio. And the ratio is produced in any key. They're not about specific keys. They're not about specific notes. It's not about that it's a B. It's not about that the chord is a C major. It's about that whatever key you're in, a given note is some number given here in relationship to that tonic, to that 1. In the key of E, B is 5, but in the key of B, B is 1, and F sharp is 5. And F sharp then will produce the 5 feeling. So you see, a particular pitch floating in midair, you know, if you're just cold listening for the day and suddenly you hear this pitch, to me right now this sounds like 6, but it's because I've just been playing the B drone. If I were to put on a piece of music right now and this was the first pitch I'd hear in the song, like right now, that pitch would sound like 6 to me, even if the song was in a different key. And until other notes start coming in to show you otherwise, oh, this is not the key of B, my ear then is going to actually recontextualize this to sound like whatever it happened to be. Like right now, for some reason, I'm hearing it as 5, and this sounds like 1 to me. So I don't know why, but my mind decided to switch that. So every specific pitch can feel like any degree, any number, given the context to produce that. It's all about what key you're in determines what a particular pitch feels like. And that particular pitch, when you label it number-wise, always feels the same. 5 always feels like 5, 2 always like 2, 7 always like 7, and so on. So you see, you're able to learn this because of this consistency. You don't have to learn a million different notes. It's just in total 12, and in the major scale 7. And the 1 is kind of a given, but the rest, you know, they do take a bit of time, but it's not that hard. You're not learning 100, you're just learning 12. And I mean, the alphabet's 26 in English, so it seems like it's pretty doable to learn 12. And they're all distinct. I mean, you can recognize 12 different colors. Here they are. You can recognize 12 different friends. You can recognize 12 different sensations in your body. It's not actually difficult to do. It's because this is not an intellectually complex topic. It might take a long time to do, depending on who you are and your musical background and all that, but it's not difficult, and you can't make it go any faster other than doing some each day. But even then, if you wanted to just do it all day, I'm not really of the view that that would make it go faster. You just do it a little bit here, a little bit there, a little bit here, a little bit there. As you're listening to music, as you're composing music, as you're playing music, you take note. Oh yeah, I'm playing this, and that's the 9 of that, which is the 2. Oh, that's the feeling of 2. Right, I can hear it. Okay, forget about it and move on. This sort of thing, you know. When you hear a song that you really like, you try to work out the melody or something. You work out the melody, but then you figure out what the numbers are, and then you sing the melody again, keeping in mind the numbers, and something will start to click. It'll be like, oh, right, that melody does have all those feelings of all those numbers. You know, let's take an example. Okay, so if we do this slow, 1 up to 1, Notice, I'm going to play that again. Notice that each one of those notes feels the way that we've already introduced it. 1, up to 1, 7. Does it not feel like that 7 sort of edgy, tense thing? 5, does it not feel like that shiny, whatever you want to say? Now, even though this note is below the tonic that I played before, in a lower octave, it still feels like 6. Let's quickly do this one more time. I'm going to move this now to another key. Refresh this. And we're going to play the same melody. Oops. Now here's one. Oops. So this is now the next exercise we can talk about, which is that there is the phase of this practice, not that this phase ends, but there's the phase of this practice where you're simply listening to, singing, playing individual degrees over a drone, taking note of the feelings. Then there is the attempting to produce those feelings without playing them, just singing them out and then checking against it. There's that sort of practice. There is playing small melodies over a drone, like say nursery rhymes or, I'm actually in this key. Notice that, this is a perfect example. I play it here. Within a few notes, your ear orients to whatever key I'm trying to put forward here. And in this case, E. These numbers are going to be completely wrong now, of course, because the numbers are keyed into the key, or tuned to the key that I'm playing in with the drone. Sounds like 3, 2, 1, 2, 3, 3, 3, 2, 2, 2, 3, 5, 5. So if I want to play that song in a different key, I can do it immediately because I know 3, 2, 1, 2, 3, 3, 3, 2, 2, 2, 3, 5, 5. And as soon as we start to do it, your ear will abandon the previous key and orient to the new one. And all of a sudden, this note that sounded like 2 in the previous key now sounds like 3 in this key, even though it's the exact same pitch. So there's the playing simple nursery rhymes against the drone and feeling each note as it passes, pausing the drone and playing them or singing them even better, and feeling each note as it passes, being aware of the number. 3, 2, 1, 2, 3, 3, 3, blah, blah, blah. Not F sharp, E, D, E, F sharp, 3, 2, 1, 2, 3, 3, 3. That's the important point here. Now, where the rubber hits the road is in transcribing actual melodies from real music. Because in this sort of laboratory environment that we're in here, we're isolating ourselves. We're saying there's just a drone and there's just one melodic instrument and it's free time. There's no rhythm, there's no nothing. So it's the perfect playground to hear and feel these things because you're having the purest context. The drone is always sounding, you're hearing the note, and you're getting the relationship. There's nothing else in there that's confounding the whole thing. Of course, in real music, that's not the case. In real music, even if there's only one chord and there's a melody playing, there's still most likely multiple instruments playing those chords, portions of those chords sometimes, flickering in and out here and there. The bass is maybe moving, even though it's outlining just a single chord. The melody is in a different instrument, blah, blah, blah. There's a lot of complexity already without even mentioning the notion of chord progressions, which is its own whole thing that we'll talk about. But what you can do at this stage for an exercise is listen to a song that you want to work out the melody for. It's something simple. Get the melody through listening, pause it, and then either imagine or sing the melody back. Because in doing that, outside of the context of the song, you're able to essentially sound this internal tonic without you even needing to think about how to do that. It will just sort of happen. And you'll be able to more clearly hear the feeling of each degree uncluttered by the rest of the music going on. So you play the song, learn the melody, pause it, sing the melody, or play it if you have to, or imagine it. And then now turn your attention towards the feeling of each melody note and say, that feels like 3, that feels like 2, that feels like 5, or whatever, right? Maybe you're wrong, maybe you're right. The ones that you're good at, the degrees that you're good at already, will work as kind of like, milestones or markers or checkpoints for you to say like, I thought I was hearing 3, 2, 1, but actually I was hearing 7, 6, 5, because that last one in the chain, here's 3, 2, 1, here's 7, 6, 5, actually feels like a 5 to me, and I know my 5s really well, and I recognize that, so I could tell these other ones are wrong, and I had to recalibrate. This happens a lot during practice, because, like I said, some of the notes have similar harmonic feelings to them, and that's because of various things we won't get into right now. And so it's easy to get confused by certain things. You might think that the 1 is actually the 5. You might think that 7 is actually 3, or 6 is actually 3, more likely. That 5 is 2, and so on. So listen to music, pause it, sing it back, feel the individual melody notes, and then go test it on your instrument and say, did I get it right? Cool. Next, move on. Another song, play it, get the melody, pause, sing it, guess what it is by trying to hear the feelings of the degrees, then test. Find the notes on the instrument, figure out the key. Is it correct? Move on, so on. So that's sort of the next area. And the area beyond that, you might say, is being able to do it in real time with the music, given a single chord context. So again, let's say it's even like funk, where there's often just like one chord playing for a while in a vamp of some sort, and you hear a melody. Can you, without having to pause the music, tell what it is that you're hearing? Could you play the melody back? It's just a bit of an extension from this, where now you're able to take in the complexity of the other instruments and not get confused by all the shiny, pretty stuff happening, and you can focus in on the feeling of those melody notes. But beyond that is where the complexity ramps up. And yeah, this is something that is not really dealt with in any apps, as far as I know, ear training apps at the moment. And this is about the relationship of doing this in a chord progression context. Because as chords change, melody notes may, depending on who you are and what you've been training in the day and whether you've eaten lunch or whatever, may sound like their position in the key, or they may sound like their position related to the chord. So let's just do a little example of this. I don't want to go into this too much today because it's its own whole topic, but if we stay in D and we play a thing that goes 1 5 1 5 in the melody. Just that's all. Right now, These notes both sound identical to the drone to me. This sounds like 5-1, 5-1, 5-1. Now say we go to a G chord. Now, this is now the 2 or the 9. Ignore these numbers. In fact, I should probably turn these numbers off, or turn the recognition of my keyboard off. All right, there you go, rainbow. Now, this can either have the quality of sounding like 2 against the G, and this sounding like 5, or you might still be maintaining the feeling here, 5-1. Does it still sound like 5-1, or does it sound like 2-5? You can imagine this as the chords get. This is a bit too much color for me right now. As the progressions get more complex and melody notes hold across chord changes and all sorts of stuff that happens in real music, you can imagine there's a lot of potential confusion and complexity that can arise there. And how to deal with that is a matter of experience. It's a matter of becoming versed in how to sort of like tilt your head such that, not physically, but tilt your ear such that you force a certain way of hearing the melody. And with experience and practice, you're able to hear a given melody note as it relates to the current chord. Like I could hear that was a 9 against that G chord. Or you can tilt the other way, so to speak, and hear that it's actually a 5 in the key. So yeah, that's its own whole topic that perhaps we'll have another stream on sometime. But that already is, if this is all new to you, is something that's a ways off needing to worry about, really. It's best to start with drones and playing and singing and doing simple melodies. And of course, as always, go try more difficult stuff. Like it's good to try, and it's good to fail, and it's good to try to learn from your mistakes that way too. Definitely worth doing. But it just to be clear, it has its own complexity, big time. That's worth noting. All right, so let me make sure that I've covered everything that I wanted to. And if you got any questions, please feel free. I guess the last thing I'll say here on these degrees is that, of course, I've only been doing 1/2 of the circle because it's the major scale. But all of these degrees, too, that you find in the minor scale and other modes, obviously, they feel certain ways as well. So let's just compare. Yeah. You know what? Before we do that, I'm now going to play without these things illuminating. So I'm going to keep it in D, and I'm just going to play some slow melodies, and it's not going to highlight what I'm playing anymore. And I just want you to maybe try to guess what degrees you're hearing, and then we'll talk about it a little bit too. What is that? Yeah, Ray, that's right, it was 5. Now here's that really distinctive one. This is the most tense interval in the key, scale degree in the key. So 7, which means that's 1. Oops, we haven't done that one yet. I missed my finger, but we'll go with it. There's 5 again. Because the way the chat, there's a delay in the chat, I can't actually take your answers. It's unfortunate. There's like a 10-second or more delay, but you're just going to have to guess yourself. So I'm just going to play a note. I'm going to give a couple seconds, and then I'm going to say which degree it is, just for a little bit of practice. In fact, this is something that several times I've thought about doing a series of that could be put on like Spotify or YouTube or something, almost a podcast, but it's not a podcast. The idea is to have, like, let's say an hour-long this session, where it's just notes being played and maybe me talking about what they are, as a way of, I kept wanting to be like, what's some kind of ear training that I can do while I'm in the car, where it's not just me singing over a drone. I also want some input given to me where I'm having to like work it out, or some sort of thing. If that makes any sense to you, or something you'd want, let me know. And if there's any way you think to improve it, I'd be curious. I'm trying to think, what is the way to generate a series of like hour-long listenable ear training exercises that are done in this style. Anyway, here we go. This is 1. 3. 7. 6. 3. 5. 2. 1. 4. 3. 2. Now, I'm going to play some of these other degrees. How distinct is that, hey, compared to all the rest? In this context, sticks out like a sore thumb, flat 6, as you can see. Look at where flat 3 and 3 are on the thing. They're half step apart. And they're both 3, flat 3 and 3, but they sure feel different. So you see, how distinct is this? This is like, this doesn't feel like this. This doesn't feel like this. It feels like, it's not subtle. You can learn it. You just need to name it and hear it many times over. You already have the capacity to feel it. Everyone does. That's why we're here. That's why we like music, of course. Flow of feeling. We enjoy the feelings. These are the feelings in their most simplified form. All right. You're eager to know what program you're using. Yeah, this is a custom thing right now. It's not available to anybody. It's just something that a friend of mine helped me create. And there's so much more that can be done with this. I mean, this is the absolute bare bones. I wanted to know if people found this useful. And if so, I'll maybe continue developing it in another direction and add some more functionality to it, because it can be used, we're not doing it now, but of course it can be used for chords. It can have other information shown within it. I mean, I've thought about it a lot. There's a ton of stuff that can be done with this. But this is sort of a simplified first step in visualizing this sort of thing. And like I said at the beginning, Stephen Malinowski's harmonic coloring animations use basically the same set of colors. That's where I was inspired from, and is a very interesting experience to go through as well. All right. Now, I had a couple other points I wanted to talk about before we end. All right, there's this topic of using references and melodic resolutions when we're doing this kind of ear training. That is, in interval ear training, if you're trying to learn a fifth or trying to learn a seventh or anything, people will tell you that the first two notes of certain songs can be used to learn those things. I can't remember what they are because I don't like that method. But there's a whole bunch of them that they say, if you remember that the first two notes of Star Wars is this, and the first two notes of Happy Birthday is this, and so on. There's other ways of having reference points as well. The point is that those are all reference points. The point is that that's another layer in between the recognition. There comes the sound, there comes the scanning reference points. Oh, it sounds like Star Wars. Then there comes, Star Wars is a fourth. Oh, this must be a fourth, right? This is too much. It needs to be the sound, So I would advise don't use any crutches. Don't use any of these reference point ideas. And to a certain extent, even though I recommend the use of it in general, there's an app called Functional Ear Trainer. And Functional Ear Trainer works by playing a cadence into some key. These numbers are not going to match right now at all, so just ignore them. And then it will play some note. And it will ask you what it is, and it will, whether you get it right or wrong, it's going to resolve it by step to the tonic. So in this case, it was the 7, and it will walk it up. But if it was, say, the 4th, it'll walk down. The idea being that if you hear that enough times, you start to feel almost the distance from the tonic of a certain sound by having heard so many times it resolving to the tonic, moving up or moving down. And while that is useful, I do think it is also a kind of crutch, this sort of reference point idea of needing the resolution, the melodic resolution, because this sound, I should play in the key that we're actually in so that it makes a bit of sense. This sound doesn't need any other reference to be what it is. It just sounds like 4. I need to play this some more so we can really hear it. This just sounds like 4. It doesn't need to reference another song. It doesn't need to be resolved in any way. Those are techniques that come in the practicalities. Say you're trying to work out a melody by ear and you think it's this degree, but you're not totally sure. So then you resolve it mentally. You walk it down to the tonic. Oh yeah, I was right. It was a 4. Or no, I was wrong, whatever. But the actual practice, that's a crutch. That's something that is delaying your gaining familiarity with the direct feeling itself. Just go for that. Go for that. It's right out in the open. There's nothing that's hiding this feeling. It just feels like that. And if you learn what that is, that's 4, eventually you really can't be fooled. That's not true. You can still be fooled. But for the most part, you can't be fooled. What will end up fooling you is more complex musical contexts where your ear latches on to something or gets confused by something and you end up hearing in a different key. That happens, and I can't really find a way around that. I make mistakes all the time. Yep. All right, so that's the one point I wanted to make about references and melodic resolutions. In reality, all knowledge is used all the time. This is only one dimension. Like I said at the beginning, this whole idea of scale degrees and their feelings is only one part of the musical puzzle of translating heard music, whether externally or in your mind, into played music or at least conceptually understood music. It's not like this is the only thing you do. This is a very core element of it, But the other things are also important. And when it comes time, like if I'm in a jam situation is a good example, jamming with people and someone starts playing, I don't know what key they're playing in. Let's say I can't see their instrument and I don't have perfect pitch, so I can't just work it out. I need to do something to figure out what to play. At that moment, I'm not going to, unless I'm in a certain mood, I'm not going to try to like test myself and say, okay, you can only use scale degree feelings to figure this out. No, I'm just going to do anything I possibly can to figure it out as fast as possible. And that probably means I'm going to play a note, and that note is going to sound and feel like something. I might recognize a scale degree. I might recognize that that feels like a half step from the note someone else just played, or a fifth away from the tonic, or whatever. All sorts of things can come up. The point is that in actual practice of music, whether transcribing or playing or whatever, you use everything. You use all of your life experience, all of your instrument experience, all of your ear training, all of your theory knowledge, all of your everything. Because who cares? The point is to get it done. The point isn't to do it in some particular way, and whatever works, works. But of course, we do it in a particular way in order to train certain skills. But when it comes time for the rubber to hit the road, you just get it done. And maybe you don't even use this at all because you haven't trained it enough or whatever. You use some other technique, it's fine. So I wanted to make sure that's clear, that I'm not saying that I and other people are only doing it this way. That's not the case. Even if we say that we're only doing a certain thing this way, still we can't separate ourselves from the huge backlog of past musical experience and theory knowledge and failures and all that. It's all there. And for the most part, we don't even know that it's there. It's like subconsciously playing into the experience of doing whatever it is we're doing without even really knowing what it is that's happening. It's obviously very complex, non-linear thing, music. It's everything all at once, but training like this is super helpful. Yep, realistic expectations, we talked about that. Don't think you're going to get this tomorrow or next week or anything. I put some progress checks and goals in here, to sort of like, you want to see where you're at. Can you recognize the tonic? That's a place to be. If you can't do that, that's really worth doing first. And you should watch my previous video, The Secret of Ear Training. Can you produce the tonic? Given a drone, can you sing the tonic? Given a piece of music, can you sing the tonic? That was also covered in the previous video. Can you recognize each degree of the major scale heard in isolation over a drone, like you'd get in an app or in practicing? Can you transcribe simple melodies by ear? That's a thing to try to do. It's like nursery rhymes, that is, again, using a drone context. Can you transcribe melodies by singing them after hearing, like I said earlier, hearing a melody in real music, pausing it, singing it back with no touching of the instrument, and figure out what it is, and then check yourself? And then can you transcribe in the moment without pausing the music? As melody notes flow by, can you tell, oh, that's 5, that's blah, 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 whatever. All this also goes for singing with the drone, like I said. Honestly, I'd really recommend this thing that I've been doing the past year or whatever. Just go out on a walk in the forest, put on a drone in your headphones, and just have at it. Just start singing and humming and feeling different resonances and experimenting. It's really super useful and fun. Then, of course, there's much more to this than just single notes. Of course, there's chords, intervals, and all sorts of other stuff that can go on in music. And all those things also get recognized in this way through repeated familiarity, gaining experience with the feeling state of any given relationship or structure in music, putting a name to it. And then over time, it starts to become instinctive to the point where you're hearing music one day and you say, oh, that's that. It really is like that. And it's really like magic when it happens because, like I said, the process is so behind the scenes. It's so non-conceptual and non-linear that you don't even know how you're learning it. You're just hearing these things over and over and naming them, but there's no A plus B equals C for it. It's just, I don't know, that's 5, that's 5, that's 5. And then someday comes the moment when you're hearing someone sing and they sing a note and you say, that's 5. And it's like magic. You don't even know how it's happening. It just jumps out. And then as you practice more, they all start to jump out, and the chords jump out, and the intervals jump out. So when you see people that can do this, that can play by ear in this sort of way anyway, where they can hear music and play it back, or jump into a jam session and play anything along with what's happening, generally speaking, with subtle variations on a per-person basis, that's how it's working. And that's not a process of calculation for the most part. A person's not sitting there saying, all right, so if that's the thing and that's the thing, that must be the 5 and that must be, it's too slow. That's for practice time. When it comes together, it's like magic. You just start and it all just shows up. And that's the 5 chord, and that's the 3 on top of the 5 chord, and that's moving to the thing, and that's the thing, and it's just all there. But without even having to word it, it's present and accessible. That's the goal, right? That's what we all want out of ear training, I think, is musical fluency in music's own terms, in the terms of feeling, in the terms of instinctive, You still need to translate it to your instrument, of course, and that's some conceptual layer is required there, but that's the minimum conceptual layer, I think. And I guess at some point, as is the case for me to some small degree, the conceptual layer also goes, and there's a more direct connection. But of course, for players of instruments who are very, very serious and have practiced untold thousands of hours in their lives, that conceptual layer is really not happening either anymore. And there's just the fluency. Right. So, questions, if there is any, before we go. I'm just going to read some of these comments here. I've had this experience using that app. The 4th takes more time processing because its crutch melody is so long. I'm not really sure how I should shed the reflex. I guess practicing away from focusing the direct experience. Absolutely. It's just playing 4s against tonics a lot and comparing them to other degrees. And then finding 4s in famous melodies like we had there with Twinkle Twinkle Little Star and Somewhere Over the Rainbow and anything. When you find melodies that have a 4 in them, you take note of it. Right, that's that 4 feeling. That's that 4 feeling. Eventually, it'll be very obvious. Yeah, all right, well, good. I'm glad that there's not many questions. I hope that I was able to explain most of that quite clearly. Last thing I want to do here is, as an example of what I mentioned earlier, where the point of all this is that specific scale degrees sound the way they do in relation to a given key center. They don't just sound that way. Those pitches don't just sound that way on their own. It's all to do with relationship. If I play Somewhere Over the Rainbow again, but I'm going to play it now in, let's say, B, like we did before. But we play it over the D drone. We're going to hear the effect of what happens here. You're not going to hear this anymore. This isn't going to sound like 1, 7, 5, 6, 7, 1. I know that my thing is not working. In fact, that's what you're going to hear it as, the degrees that you just saw on the thing. Go ahead with one more question, Bjorn. Here it is. So play the D drone. Now listen to this. Compared to and so on. So you can't get away from it. Your ear is gonna discern the musical context, and it's going to color the melody notes according to it. You can't stop that from happening. And that's to our benefit, because once you've done some training in this, you can rely on it for the most part, because your ear can't lie about it. You might be thinking and looking at your instrument and saying, that must be 6, but when you play it, it sounds like 3. It's 3. And if it's not 3, there's a reason that it sounds like 3. There's something that's in the music that is creating a context for your ear to interpret it as 3, because your ear doesn't have a choice in the matter. It can't be convinced by intellectual explanation what it's hearing. It just feels the way that it feels, and that's it. And if you then change the musical context and that note feels different, it just feels different. There's nothing you can do about it. But that's the benefit of it, because then once you gain confidence in this, you don't need to do all the calculation and mental gymnastics. You simply hear a note and it feels some way, and you recognize the feeling and you trust it. And you say, that's what that is. That's the feeling of 2. That's the feeling of flat 13. That's the feeling of sharp 11, whatever it happens to be. How do you learn to recognize the difference between the 5 above the 1 as opposed to the 5 below the 1? There's no difference. Where is the 1? Is it this? Is it this? Is it this? They all sound like 1 to me. Is this 5 above the 1, or is it below the 1? I mean, it's below this one, but it's above this one. 5 always feels like 5. 1 always feels like 1. It doesn't matter what the octave is. So again, try to ignore the pitch and be with the feeling state. Really, they're not actually two different things, and that sentence doesn't really make any sense. But perhaps as a little prompt, it kind of makes sense. It can be helpful. That it's the feeling, not the pitch. Is there any good way to practice this in situations where you can't make noise? I commute by train a lot, for example, maybe using the podcast thing. That's exactly it, Bjorn. That's what I was trying to think of. What's the best way to do this where you can do it, on a train, in a car, in a bus, and simply hear. I mean, it would be nice if there was an app that did all this. There probably is one. I'm also hoping to get an ear training app made. That's been in the works for some months now, but I've not been able to get it happening yet. That this app, should it ever come to be, will be able to actually generate musical contexts on the fly with chord progressions or drones or whatever you want, and always play examples in actual context, not free floating in space, which doesn't ever exist in real music. It's kind of funny that all ear training apps work that way, which is understandable. It's hard to generate music in real time, but we'll figure it out. So otherwise, you got to use apps, basically, Bjorn. When starting out, I used to confuse seconds with sevenths, thirds with sixths, and fourths with fifths. You're probably talking about intervals, right? That like thirds and sixths sound similar, sevenths and sevenths sound similar, and so on, in terms of like actual absolute distances between two notes. Where here we're talking about scale degrees, and even though seconds and sevenths are both somewhat dissonant sounding, it's not the same in a way as playing these inverted intervals, a fifth inverted to a fourth kind of thing. All right. So I think that's going to do it for today. I don't really want this to be some massive stream. I mean, it probably is a massive stream already. I don't know how long I've been going for now. Yeah, an hour and 40. Jeez. Anyway, appreciate you all. Hope it was helpful for you. Please let me know what you thought, either in the comments here or whatever. Let me know if there's anything more you want to see. Join the Discord if you're not in there already. There's a link in the description, which is a place to come chat about ear training, music, production, theory, composition. You can participate in challenges we have there. I'm going to post the Stephen Malinowski link later, but for now, I'm just going to write his name in here. Smolin is the name of the channel, and Harmonic Coloring is the name of the kind of stuff that he's doing, that this was inspired by this graphic that I've got here. And do the work, basically. If you want the results, you have to do the work. Luckily, the work is fun and it's cool, and it's really like exciting to see the results come from it. And the problem with this work, so to speak, is that it's not easily measurable. And like I say, it's sort of subconscious, so you can't just memorize something and say, I got it now. It's a matter of having a new perspective on music, that these feeling states exist and that they can be memorized, they can be learned, they can be named in a consistent way, so that you start to listen in that way, you start to practice in that way. When you're playing, when you're listening to music, when you're thinking about it, you start to have this slant on the whole thing. And then it really starts to become clear, in a certain sense, what's happening in music and how it works. You do gain fluency. You gain fluency in a new way that theory can't give you, and in a sense is more important. It's more fundamental. It's more direct, you know. And of course, this combined with theory, for me, that's the Holy Grail. But for other people, perhaps not. Depends. All right, everybody. Thanks so much. Hope you have a good rest of your day. And I'll be back again at some point. For now, appreciate you. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.